She has worked across various industries, and before all of this, she built her career in finance.
That's a real challenge, and you're right. Clients almost never.
There is a very structured process you follow for migration. Welcome back to the Digital Shift by Kanerika. I'm your host, Kuhu Chandak. Legacy systems stick around because replacing them is risky. They take longer, cost more, and when things go wrong, the business feels it. Most teams make it worse by jumping straight into the technical work without understanding who depends on it, what they are moving into, or what success looks like on the other side. That's where business analysis comes in. And our guest today has done exactly that across some high-stake complex projects. Manisha Chowdari heads the business analysis practice at Kanerika. She has worked across various industries, and before all of this, she built her career in finance, marketing, and sales. This kind of background gives her a lot of perspective, which most people in this space don't have. Manisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm honored.
So, Manisha, before we get into the migration side of the things, your path to here is pretty different from most people in this space. Finance, sales, marketing, and now leading a BA team. How did that actually happen?
Well, it wasn't exactly a straight line. I started out in financial advisory and wealth management as a fresher, which sounds very different from what I do now. But honestly, I'd say it laid the foundation for everything that I've done after that. And the work was deeply client facing, and a big part of it was learning, how to distinguish what the client actually said that they needed and, what they actually needed, right? There's two very different things often. Now, from then, I, did sales and marketing as well. I would say any financial services role demands for sales and marketing, which has sharpened a different role, right? How to communicate value clearly, how to read what's, really driving a business decision versus, what's being said in the room. Now, when I landed at Kanerika, and I started looking into how different businesses work from in. All right, I've looked at financial statements before, but I've never looked into operations deep down. All right, I try to learn, how different domains work. Started with Kanerika's understanding, then to multiple domains that I've gained expertise over years now. Now I realized all of it was the same skill set, right? Just applied differently. Good business analysis is fundamentally about bridging intent and execution. You're translating what the business is, looking forward to into what your team can deliver. Now, then making those two things, making sure that those two things, are in line all throughout the project. I'd been doing versions of it my whole career without ever calling that it is business analysis.
You're right. And that background probably helps. Because most clients don't walk in asking for a business analyst. So, how do you make that work when a project starts?
That's a real challenge. And you're right. Clients almost never come in saying, we need a BA. They'll, come in basically asking, maybe we need to migrate to Fabric by Q3, right? They have the timeline picked, platform picked. And the BA conversation might feel like you're asking them to slow down, before they've even started. The way I've learned to flip that is to show what the first 1 to 2 weeks look like, and more importantly, what comes out of it, right? We start with structured requirement gathering, understanding their business processes, the KPIs that matter to the end users, and who the end users are, frankly, and what level of access I would say each of them need, right? Who are self-serve, folks, who are just the viewers, right? It sounds straightforward, but it surfaces things that nobody had written down anywhere. Because these decisions of migrations and modernizations per se are specifically leadership decisions, right? The end users are never consulted. So doing this deep dive analysis into who the user is going to be, what are they expecting in their daily ops, makes a whole lot of sense. And the approach I always take is to do reverse engineering, right? Understand the business processes to KPIs, to data sources, all the way to their source systems, right? That helps us, in fact, a very clear picture into what the end product would look like, and it also gives us a very good picture into the entire medallion architecture that we're going to build. So it basically is like what does a specific user look in for the dashboard. It's like, let's say there is a user. If for a day he looks at that particular report first thing in the morning, right? How should that be looking like? So, and the clarity is actually what gets clients excited about this BA conversation. Once they see it laid out that way, their KPI is connected all the way back to their data sources with every layer mapped, it stops feeling like a delay and starts feeling like the project that is actually making sense for the first time. The conversation changes completely. Like 2 weeks into the project, you know what you're actually going to get. So then they basically say that it's definitely not an overhead, and it's what after everything, it makes it cheaper and faster. And frankly, it's what protects from them having a very uncomfortable conversation with their leadership 1 quarter down. So
Yeah, and that process makes a lot of sense. So when a client comes to Kanerika, let's say saying they want to migrate, what are they usually walking in with?
well, almost always, they've already made a decision on, what platform, right? They know they want to move to, let's say, Microsoft Fabric or Power BI, or let's say DevExpress for that matter, right? Or maybe they're retiring an old ETL tool, right? What they haven't done is, full audit of, their current environment, right? And the gap is, very significant, often very significant, right? There's frequently a gap between, what leadership believes, the data landscape looks like, and, what's actually running in the production. Leadership might say we have about roughly 200 reports to migrate, but when you do the discovery, you see that there are more than 600 reports, right? And some of them are duplicates. Some of them have processes which were defined long back, and the people who have defined those processes that they don't even exist in the organization. And some of them you have an idea that this particular process is feeding info into one downstream application, but you have nested downstream applications that you see is actually feeding information into. So it's not that the client is actually hiding this, right? It's a genuine case. They really don't know what their environment looks like, and what reports are actually eating how much of CPU utilization. And these are the questions that we ask and we solve through our pre-migration discovery utility, and surface all of this in the first BA discovery phase. So like I said, the part of BA's job is surfacing this gap as early as possible, because the later you find it, the more it costs.
So Kanerika's migration expertise are span across reporting tools, data pipelines, automation. So does the work look different depending on what's being migrated?
Yeah, see, the fundamentals are the same across all of them, right? Discovery, stakeholder alignment, translating business requirements into technical specs. But where the complexity, lives, shifts depending on what we're really migrating. Now, with ETL migrations, take an example, maybe Informatica to Fabric, right? The risk tends to be in the transformation set, right? The transformation logic. These pipelines are often built on rules on top of the rules, right? When I'm saying this, basically there are like nested workflows. And the business logic is buried inside those workflows rather than documented anywhere. So it's very painstaking work to surface that, business logic. Now with BI migrations, it's different, right? Tableau or maybe Crystal reports to Power BI, or Crystal to, let's say, DevExpress for that matter. Now the challenge is often more about the usage, and intent both. You're asking questions like, why does this dashboard exist? Or who actually looks at it? Apart from the discovery that we do as part of pre-migration, we also look at audit metrics, right? What's the usage of these dashboards? Who are really using it, right? And what decision does it really support? Is it a daily report, or is it, like, let's say, a monthly aggregated report? And because if you migrate a report that nobody is actually using, it's a wasted effort, right? Effort on our side, cost on client side. Now, if you migrate one incorrectly, let's say a CEO dashboard, let's just say that you're migrating that differently, your DAX calculations are different while you're migrating all. Now someone is using it for a board presentation when we say that, and that's a very different problem. So when you're looking at BI reports, the calculations, the visuals, all of them matter a lot. Now, if you're looking at RPA migrations, UI path to Power Automate, for example, often becomes as much about process redesign as they're about technical, conversion. Because the automation often was built around, multiple years ago. The process was, different back then, right? Because there is an automation exists, right? The leadership is just following it. Now, there is a lot of change that has come into the organization post, the process is automated. Now, while you are at it, you look at process mining, right? And you look at process change propositions. You build that into your, workflows. So each path, like I said, has its own version of where things hide. A part of good BA work, I would say, is knowing, where to look.
And does the industry you're working in shifts things further? Like a pharma client and a manufacturing client are protecting very different things. How does that change your approach?
Significantly, I would say. Industry context shapes what's genuinely non-negotiable versus what's just a preference. Now, in pharma, data integrity and audit trails, I'd say, they're not just best practices, right? They're regulatory requirements. A compliance report with a single incorrect figure isn't just an embarrassment. It can create serious regulatory compliance issues, regulatory exposure, I would say, right? So during discovery, we're extremely thorough, uh, about tracing how data flows through, different systems, and how data flows through validation and reporting pipelines, and testing before go live has to be exhaustive. For, I'd say, financial services, you said, right? The concern is often around, regulatory and reporting pipelines, because you need to produce accurate output every single day. There's no grace period, before you're still stabilizing your migration. The tolerance for error is essentially zero for financial services. Now, in manufacturing, it's more about, productivity and operational continuity. Let's just say that, the report that you've migrated hasn't refreshed. The data is stale at 7 a.m., right? And, somewhere in the assembly line, you're looking at that report at 8 a.m. and, the entire productivity or, assembly line goes wrong, right? So I'd say the effect is, almost different for every industry. So you look at what data points you really need to concentrate on, and understand what's preference and what's a must.
All right. Previously, you mentioned there is a very structured process you follow for migration, but the industry feedback is that migrations go wrong more often than people admit. What does that actually look like when it happens?
Every migration has that moment, I'd say, right? The thing you find that wasn't in the scope and wasn't on anyone's radar, right? Right from the client's IT department to the leadership. Now, a report that's been running for 8 years and nobody in the organization can actually explain it. Data connection feeding, let's say, 3 downstream systems that was never mentioned in the project's brief as such. When that happens, the worst thing you can do is act surprised. Clients don't lose confidence when you find problems, but they lose confidence when you look like you didn't expect to find any, right? Part of what we try to establish early is that discovery exists precisely to catch these kind of things. And so when one kind of issue surfaces, the response is, rather systematic, right? Not reactive. Now, that's why to be proactive, our discovery process exists. Now, the questions like, what is this, right? And who depends on it? What's the risk of getting it wrong? And then you work through it. The migrations that go badly are usually the ones where the team treated discovery as a checkbox and then spend the rest of the project in crisis mode. Now, the ones that go well are, I would say, the ones where the team expected complexity and built in the space to actually handle it.
All right, so we're talking about a lot of migrations over here, like ETL, data, reports, and automated process migrations. What does Kanerika exactly bring in?
Okay. I'd say the biggest change that Kanerika brings in is speed and confidence. And these two things are absolutely related. When you're migrating, let's say, 500 ETL workflows manually, each one is a risk, right? Human error accumulates, something gets missed, or a rule gets transcribed incorrectly. And it takes months to actually dive back and see, what changes have happened while you're actually manually migrating. Now, the accelerator handles the extraction and conversion automatically, which immediately removes a large part of risk. But what I think matters more from the client perspective is that it frees up BA's time and the project team's time to focus on what actually requires human judgment rather than your monotonous manual transformations that you're doing, because the logic is already there, right? That doesn't need human judgment. You need machines to do transformations. That's what Kanerika is bringing in. We have built-in accelerators which are housed in our proprietary platform Flip, which does all of these ETL migrations you called data migrations, then the report migrations, all of them almost seamlessly. Now, clients feel difference in two ways. When you're pacing up the migration like this, right? They see results faster, and the process is less disruptive to their day-to-day operations. There's two things they care about the most when they're trying to migrate these kind of existing systems, legacy systems. They're trying to keep a migration from becoming an all-consuming organizational event, while they're just trying to migrate the existing legacy systems to the modernized systems. Could be cost is the reason. It could be the performance. It could be let's say there are systems that are sunning down. Whatever may be the reason, people don't want downtime. That is something, I would say, an industrial fact.
Has there been a project where Flip specifically caught something that would have derailed the whole thing if it was done manually?
Yes. And this kind of thing is more often than you'd expect, right? Recently, this happened with one leading Indian pharma client. What we've done is we migrated a fairly large set of ETL workflows for them. And during the automated extraction that we've done during the discovery, we found, in fact, Flip surfaced this dependency that nobody on the client side knew that it existed, right? A transformation rule and one workflow was quietly feeding downstream applications. In fact, it's a reconciliation process that we're talking about. It wasn't part of the original scope and wasn't in any documentation we'd been given. Now, if that had been, let's say, a manual migration, there's two scenarios. Either the team catches it during the testing, which means I'd say weeks of rework, right, and delayed go live. Obviously, that means a lot of downtime. And more likely, it gets discovered post go live. When the reconciliation process starts, basically incorrect information is being fed into the system at that point, right? Does your entire reconciliation goes for toss, and we're saying financial reconciliation, does your board reporting, etc. Now, at that point, you're actually doing emergency fixes on a live system, which is an entirely different level of stress and risk. Now, catching it during the automated extraction phase itself meant we could bring it into the scope very cleanly and get the right stakeholders involved, understood the dependencies of those systems, got the integration done, and handle it before it was ever a crisis. Now, that's the difference between accelerated migration and manual migration. Not just speed, but the category of risk that you simply don't take on.
All right, last one. So some companies have been putting off migration. Always too risky, never the right time. What do you tell them?
Yes, I tell them that, waiting doesn't reduce the risk. It just prolongs it, right? Just moves it and usually makes it worse. It's like, buying a treadmill to just hang clothes on, right? Every year you stay on a legacy system. The situation deteriorates in ways that are easy to ignore, but they're gradual, right? Because they are gradual. The more people who understand the system, they actually leave. And documentation gets worse. The person who could explain that mysterious 8-year-old calculation retires. Now, licensing costs go up, and the systems can't support the modern capabilities like AI analytics workloads, or the competitors are already running. Now, risk of staying is real. It just shows up slowly as raising costs or slower decisions and technical debt that compounds quietly. By the times it becomes visible, it's much harder to address. It's like, pouring water into a leaking bucket. Meanwhile, the organizations that migrated 2 years ago are making faster decisions, running, better analytics and pioneering in the industry, not spending their IT budget completely on, age-old legacy systems, but are actually, spending on bringing in new technologies and actually getting onto the bandwagon of, trending AI world. So the question I always ask is, do you want to do this migration planned on your timeline with the right preparation on your own terms? Or do you want to do it like under pressure when something breaks and you don't have any choice? Because one way or another, it happens. The only variable is whether you're ready or not.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Manisha. This has been a very insightful conversation. So before we wrap up, would you like to leave any thoughts for our listeners?
A very short reply, I would say, but see, it's inevitable for organizations to, go towards modernization. But I'd say we have to take that conscious call of, what we are migrating and how, because that saves a lot of, time and effort. Does cost.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone watching this episode of The Digital Shift. See you again.